The following is brought to you in part by a grant from the Foundation for White Well-Being.
Look into this dark, unforgiving glass eye, the mesh of the microphone. Tell it your deepest thoughts, hopes, fears, and desires. We will take these emotions, turn them, and feed them back to you, for we have goals that your feelings will assist. This is how we rule. From the shadows, playing your emotions like puppet strings, we lead you to destinations that we have prepared, and you willingly oblige, thinking these decisions to be your own. When you do as we wish, we reward you, and when you go against us, we punish you. In a million subtle ways, we influence your supposedly free choice. By this method, we rule over a population convinced that they are the masters of their own destiny. Welcome to the Empire of Lies.
Hello, everyone. Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Empire of Lies. I am Yiz the Eunuch. My co-host here is Muse Fist, also known as Chris.
Hey, everyone.
I hope you all are ready for a good presentation tonight. We're going to be talking about something very important to understand about not the past, not even the recent past, but the very looming present. And before we get started, just like you saw in the intro, I would deeply appreciate it if you would share some of your hard-earned dollars with Chris and I. We split the proceeds 50-50 for this stream series. As you saw in the intro, you can contribute via Entropy, which is what I prefer. You can find that link to share your thoughts with us and your dollars pinned in the chat. We can also have hyper chats on Odyssey, rants on Rumble, and if you please, PayPal and Cash App as well. And if you'd like to be a monthly supporter of mine, you can do so over on Subscribestar. And if you are a Subscribestar member, you can send us tips, which are like super chats over on Subscribestar. So this is a short, condensed, pre-planned presentation that lasts about an hour, and we will be getting to all of your paid chats at the end of the hour. And towards the end of the hour, when it's my turn to talk, my part of the presentation, I will hopefully remember to pop up the banner that will remind you to get in your paid chats before the end of the hour. Now, there's a lot to get through tonight, so we're just going to get right into it. I have nothing to preface this presentation with. Chris, I'm going to hand it over to you because we have a lot to get through. So go ahead and preface this with whatever you'd like to say before you get into it.
So the way that Western governments, manage narratives around terrorist attacks has evolved since the start of this century. The original idea was to essentially downplay these attacks and tell people, not to be afraid of the people that were attacking them. There was no sort of worry about Islam, for example. But these narratives have now essentially run out of steam, have run their course. And now, as a result, we are entering a darker timeline where instead of essentially aiming the narrative at the people who are responsible, they are now aiming the narrative at the people that are outraged. This is very, very clear from Keir Starmer's speech that he delivered today after meeting with his police and intelligence staff. The word has gone out. The new narrative is not that people in the West, in the UK in particular, should be concerned about migration or the consequences of migration. No, what we should be concerned about are people responding to migrant attacks, to migrant terror incidents. And I'm just going to go through a bit of a presentation on how we got to this place and what the implications are. So if we can in Smolin.
In Smolin!
And let's begin. This picture, of course, is a piece of propaganda that was designed on contract for the UK government after a Muslim terror attack in London. I think it was after the London one. So the recent horrific stabbing attack on children in Southport in the United Kingdom and the subsequent riots have focused attention on the way that the UK government manages the aftermath of terror attacks. There have been many notable ones in the UK, starting with the 7/7 tube and bus bombings and the Manchester Arena bombing, and many other attacks such as the stabbings outside of Fishmongers Hall, etc., etc. Indeed, there are so many by this point, it is impossible to remember them all. In each case, the UK government has rolled out a carefully managed PR or strategic communications campaign to deflect criticism of the Islamic community. When ISIS was still an active group before being destroyed on the orders of Donald Trump, despite the resistance of the intelligence community, the messaging was clear. It was only ISIS that would win by fostering division. We should come together. The UK public was told that it was only a few extremists who did not represent Islam. After all, Islam is a religion of peace. And after all, we were told, all religions are really the same when you get down to it. They all worship the same God, despite minor doctrinal differences. We should not blame groups for things, because that is collective punishment, something we are told is abhorrent, something that the Nazis practiced when they condemned the Jews. We must be above that. We must look at every person as an individual, unless, of course, they are an extremist. Events such as the Manchester bombing are not representative of Islam as a whole. We must not look back in anger, but come together in the face of adversity. My, how things have changed. During the 2020 revolution, collective blame and punishment was displayed on a mass scale against white men, against Christians, against the unvaccinated, the Russians. Collective blaming was suddenly back in style. The truth, of course, is that it never went away. It is impossible to regard every group as a collection of individuals, not just because you cannot know them all, but because when you are dealing with a group that has similar traits, qualities, ways of acting, or doctrinal beliefs, observations about them as a group are usually, not always, but usually, accurate. This is the great lie that the people of the West have been told, that stereotypes are not accurate when in fact they are usually, which is why the human brain has evolved in the way that it has. Of course, this principle is not applied equally. It is perfectly permissible to make stereotypical observations, often of the worst and most distorted kind, about the Christians, about white men, the Russians, the unvaccinated, or the term that is in vogue at the moment, the far right. But it is forbidden to make observations of the same kind about the Muslims, the Indians, the blacks, the Jews, the woke, politicians, immigrants, etc. This flavor of guilt and politeness, particularly endemic in Western societies, has been deliberately weaponized in order to bring about the situation in which the West finds itself, deluged by immigrants of the worst sort. It is as though all the worst countries in the world have thrown open their jails and sent the worst segments of their populations to our shores, and the accusation of racism or being far right has been used as a cover for this endeavor. Like all of these kinds of lies, it was obvious that this one had a limited shelf life, but that does not matter. All that needs to happen is for the lie to hold long enough for the objective to be accomplished, which it clearly now has. The vaccine was exactly the same. The powers that be knew the truth would come out eventually, but it didn't matter as long as they got people to take the shot. After all, you can't unvaccinate yourself. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Someone tweeted me an article from 5 years ago, which I was unaware of, that laid out in great detail how the UK government had managed perceptions after the terrorist attacks during the early 2000s. And it is very instructive, not only in elucidating the goals that Western governments have for the people they rule over, but also the network of strategic communications bodies that manage perception in this way. The fundamental mechanism behind this opinion shaping is called controlled spontaneity, which is the art of managing events so that they seem to the public to be organic and push a desired message and outcome. There is an entire infrastructure of public relations agencies and associated glow organizations ready to spring into action when there is a terrorist event, in order to assure the public that it was a rare and random event, that no one should be blamed except extremism, and that no group or race should be in any way held responsible, except whites generally. While things are mostly peaceful, PR companies test various narratives and hashtags on the unsuspecting public to determine which will be the most effective when the next inevitable terror incident strikes. To quote the article, "Within hours of an incident, campaigns are swiftly organized, with I Heart posters designed and distributed according to the location of the attack. Plans are also drawn up for people to hand out flowers at the scene of the crime, in apparently unprompted gestures of love and support. The purpose of the operations, according to a number of people involved in their creation who spoke to the Middle East Eye," this is the publication that made the article, "is to shape public responses, encouraging individuals to focus on empathy for the victims and a sense of unity with strangers, rather than reacting with violence and anger. Many of the operations are said to be modeled on extensive plans that were drawn up to channel public anger in the event of any attack on the 2012 London Olympics. Some strategies had been devised in 2011 when social media platforms were aiding communication between protesters during the Arab Spring, and when a series of riots were erupting across English towns and cities that summer. One senior figure involved in that contingency planning told the Middle East Eye that the riots, quote, absolutely terrified the British government, and that Theresa May, the then Home Secretary, had been particularly shaken. The measures drawn up in advance of the Olympics were intended to, quote, corral the Princess Dianesque grief, that is the death of Princess Diana, that was expected to emerge after any mass casualty attack, a reference to the public mourning that followed the death of the royal in a car crash in 1997. This person describes these measures candidly as an attempt at mind control. Although there was no terrorist incident at the 2012 Olympics, variants of the plan are said to have been deployed in the wake of every attack in the UK since then. The point I noticed the change was in the Olympics, said one veteran contingency planner in the UK. The management of the secret, hidden emergency planning work behind the Olympics became the social control that we would fall back on if we had any terrorist attack or if we had any disruption. This is the hashtag we go to, and we have never come back from those days. I would just like to note that this means that the loss of Twitter to Elon Musk is probably viewed by many Western governments as a distinct security threat simply for this reason alone.
And I think that's a reason why the so-called Twitter files are so important, because when Elon made a lot of these things public, it showed us that the suspicions and the things that we had already confirmed to ourselves were openly confirmed, that government agents, especially the FBI, were giving direct either marching orders or do's and don'ts to social media companies around narrative shifting things. So we know that this is true, and there wouldn't have been probably that open and blatant of confirmation of that without Elon taking over Twitter. That probably wouldn't have become so public.
Indeed. Indeed. This job has changed significantly from planning for organic people responses to tragedy to being told, quote, "We would like the people to do that. How do you get them there?" I'm sure everyone can see where this is going, particularly in regards to the pandemic. A lot of the public responses are spontaneous, of course, but a lot are shaped. The British government doesn't want spontaneity. It wants controlled spontaneity. This plan was originally conceived for the 2012 London Olympics. The UK government was afraid that there would be a terrorist attack, but they were more afraid that if there was such an attack, the Olympics would have to be abandoned, costing hundreds of millions of pounds and blackening the reputation of the UK. Thus, a campaign was prepared that would allow the Olympics to continue by using social media and narrative shaping to ensure that the narrative would be that the UK would not bow to terror, that the plucky English would continue with the Olympics unbowed and press on regardless. Every lie told by the government to cover up a fundamental problem, while that problem continues to get worse, will eventually be exposed with massive backlash, and it seems that the UK has now reached that point. In the last 3 weeks, there have been no less than 13 different incidents of mass violence in the UK. This plan, originally, was set in motion by the Research, Information and Communications Unit of the UK Home Office, founded in 2007, which was modelled on a Cold War propaganda unit called the Information Research Department. Originally, the target of the RICU was British Muslims, who were targeted with messaging intended to de-radicalise them and stop them from travelling to Syria to join ISIS. Quote, "The target of RICU's work are British Muslims, especially males, aged 15 to 39. The aim of RICU's work is to bring about a, quote, attitudinal and behavioural change among young British Muslims as part of a counter-radicalisation program. It is part of the government's strategic communications, which is described as, quote, the systematic and coordinated use of all means of communication to deliver UK national security objectives by influencing the attitudes and behaviours of individuals, groups, and states." And there is the Wikipedia page for RICU if you would like to look it up.
And a reminder to those of you watching live or listening later, the links to the critical information, articles, Twitter threads, etc. that we use for these streams, you can find in the description of wherever you're listening to this stream.
Yes, indeed. Much of RICU's messaging was handled by a, quote, strategic communications firm called Breakthrough Media, who came up with this iconic image after the murder of a UK aid worker by ISIS in 2014, which was part of Prevent, the UK, quote, de-radicalisation program. This messaging was targeted directly at the female Islamic community, essentially trying to get wives to de-radicalise or perhaps report extremist behaviour. This suggests to me a fundamental misunderstanding of gender relations in Islam. However, this is not surprising. The lack of understanding of Islam generally among the messaging tier of the Home Office is endemic. And this can be seen by the results of their work, which has not de-radicalized anyone. However, since then, more and more of RICU's and their associated message shaping companies, their messaging has been directed at the native population. Perhaps RICU discovered that influencing Muslims was too hard. So instead, they started targeting the white native population instead. We would call these the far right now. According to people that I know adjacent to Prevent, it is staffed almost exclusively by leftist and Muslim extremists now. Ironically, there is no extremism test that you need to take to join Prevent, as long as you are leftist or a Muslim, of course. Excuse me. Anyone even vaguely, quote, right-wing will be automatically excluded or forced out. The Shawcross report into Prevent found that it had made a decisive pivot towards the, quote, far right, meaning that instead of targeting radical Islam, it was now targeting the native population. And the Shawcross report, if you want to look it up, is fascinating reading. It will tell you such things as enjoying the Lord of the Rings is far right. It is a massive caricature, very, very clearly designed to cast as wide a net as possible.
Just like that FBI report or FBI counterterrorism thing that was circulated to I believe it was the early Biden administration. I think it was in 2020 or 2021. That said that told the FBI agents that were paying attention to social media to look for young men who were into reading old books about history or on a regular gym regimen. That was considered far-right red flags. So you can see what we're up against here. This is what we talk about when it comes to institutional capture and ideological takeover. This is what we're talking about.
Yes, indeed. And the fact that these pivots occurred around the same time, I do not think is coincidental either. This betrays a very disturbing facet about modern governments in the West. As technocracy and the idea of expert governance has risen, so too has the use of narrative shaping, nudging, and other social manipulation techniques. While this could be excused if the goal was to buy time in order to fix the problem, the exact opposite has happened. Nudging has been used to get people to ignore the problem, while the government deliberately makes these problems worse. This has caused widespread distrust in media and government, and arguably has been a massive contributor to mental illness, as government tells people to ignore the evidence of their own senses. In short, the leftists in the administrative state, having decided that telling people the truth was too much effort, have abandoned the principle entirely and instead begun focusing on the most effective way to lie to the people to cover up the horrible effects of their policies. However, there is a massive downside to this, quite apart from the problems getting worse. In the nudge and social engineering literature, there is a concept called reactance. Reactance is where you tell people to do something and they do the opposite just to spite you. The way that reactance is dealt with is by making the nudges seem like suggestions, when in fact they are nothing of the sort. They are diktats, and the only reason they are framed as suggestions is so that people will not have the option of saying no. This is why these interventions start soft and then get gradually harder. The goal of the manipulation is already decided in advance, but the public are not told this, lest they are horrified by the policy and react negatively. Instead, through a slow process of incentives and disincentives, the choice environment is slowly altered through messaging, taxation, friction, making it harder to do something, until the result is achieved without the public realizing what the end goal was. The COVID vaccine was an excellent example of this. Originally presented as a noble choice, it was not until later that the really heavy-handed tactics came out. Net zero is the same, as is immigration. If the public were told the desired outcome, to implement a digital vaccine pass, to make everyone poor through energy starvation, or that the entire country would be flooded with people from the worst corners of the world as a weapon against the native population, no one would go along with it. The reason why reactance is a problem is that once it sets in, there is a tendency to disregard all government or media messaging. Much like a partner that has lied to you so many times that you no longer trust a single word they say, reactance can poison all attempts at nudging. We are rapidly reaching that point now, and the cope narrative is that you are just a contrarian. However, the unaddressed problem is that the population has been lied to so many times to their own detriment, and although it is hard to pinpoint exactly who started these lies, it is clear to a growing portion of the population that these are indeed lies. Like a spouse who swears he has stopped cheating, but comes home every week with lipstick on his collar, and then tells his wife that the reason she doesn't trust him is because she is a contrarian bitch, these tactics cannot work long term. As we watch the aftermath of the Southport stabbing attacks and a massive rise in protests about the effects of mass migration, It is clear that the government is going to stick to the tactic pioneered by the Canadians under Trudeau and simply label all resistance as far right and the people who do it as Nazis. There are already misleading photos going around Twitter claiming that people attending the march at Downing Street were throwing Nazi salutes. But how much longer can this narrative sustain itself? Unlike with the Muslim community, there has been very little effort to de-radicalize the, quote, white right-wing community, possibly because the people now running Prevent fetishize Islam and hate native working-class British people. However, the reactions to the killings is now taking over the headlines and displacing the news about the actual killings themselves. As I said on my piece about sixth-generational warfare, violence of this sort not only solves nothing, but actually strengthens the regime, as they use such outbursts to justify increasingly draconian measures against the target population. Since they are unwilling or unable to address the root causes of the problem, or because it is exactly what they really want, the problem will get worse and worse. Personally, I think this is deliberate. But there are a large number of functionaries, such as the police, who now believe that their job is not about justice, but about, quote, maintaining order. This has some curious effects. For example, in the UK now, if you go up to a group of Muslims preaching, say something untoward, and they begin to attack you, it is you who will be arrested for your own safety. I have seen this many, many times. However, like all the most horrible tricks of the regime, it is not equally applied, and its worst aspects fall upon the native population. There is nowhere else for the regime to go, narrative-wise, other than demonization. They cannot acknowledge the problem, since to do so would be to acknowledge differences in race, and they would rather be tortured than commit such a sin. In the case of Southport, differences in religion is not enough, since it is unlikely that the stabber was Muslim. Thus, the only option left is to shoot the messenger and demonize those who point out the problem. As the level of immigrant violence continues to rise, the only choice left to the regime will be managerialism by force. I suspect what they will do is introduce more digital ID and set up facial recognition camera checkpoints in many public spaces in response to, quote, the emergency. And I was proved right. I wrote this on Wednesday, and today Keir Starmer came out and said exactly that. How do I gain such perspicacious knowledge of the future? It is truly a mystery.
It is because, like me, you are cursed to notice things and see patterns. The Anglo gift of pattern recognition.
Once these measures have been found to be effective, they will become permanent. Also, I would like to point out that in the UK at least, people are very obsessed with the idea of ID cards. But the government does not need cards anymore. They have biometrics. Your face is your card. Digital ID is about the vast databases that house the data on the back end, not whether or not you have a symbolic card. In conclusion, Western governments are about to run out of runway when it comes to narrative shaping. By using the tools of influence to hide the problem and belittle those who notice it, while making the problem worse at every turn, they have induced massive mistrust and reactance among the general population, and also mental illness, in my opinion. This is not due to, quote, misinformation or some other bogeyman, but because the government itself has perpetuated the problem, lied about it, and then demonized those who point it out. Thus, the only option it has left, apart from actually honestly addressing the problem, which they will not do, is hard managerialism. This makes me wonder, what are all the PR and strategic messaging companies working on now? Is a new narrative already being seeded? New propaganda being created? What will we see in the next few months? Thank you very much.
Let's go to Embiggen View for a minute to talk. The thing that I want you listening to this right now or on replay to remember is that the people who are doing this to us, they know what they're doing. They see the data that we have. They know the demographic shift. They know the destruction that they are wreaking upon us. This is why I call them anti-white, anti-Western, etc. They willingly and knowingly perpetuate biological white erasure via mass migration, visa programs, etc., while also perpetuating social, culture, and spiritual erasure on us with all of their mind poison, the mean pathogens we're infected with from birth, all of the things that they do to young people, young white people in white countries. They push hyper-individualism, hypersexuality, transgenderism, homosexuality, girl boss this, toxic masculinity. All of these things are anti-us. And so that's why I don't call it woke. You don't call it, modern Marxism or whatever. I call it anti-white and anti-whiteism. It is the purposeful poisoning and destruction of our racial ethnic fabric. They know what they're doing, and we should hold their feet to the fire for it. If you're going to argue with these people, if you're going to go and send a hateful letter, use the correct language. Call them anti-white. Tell them that they hate white children. Tell them that by their actions, they absolutely despise the people of our country. Tell them that. Say that. Tell them that they are committing the sin of white erasure. That works. If you get lost in abstractions, whether in argument or writing nasty letters or talking to your family, if you get lost in abstractions, you're not going to make a good solid point. Make this about ending the victimization of our people. That's what I would recommend.
I think there's a lot of people that argument wouldn't work on, honestly, at this point.
I think that's what people need to hear, though.
Maybe, but I think you are seeing a rise of people who genuinely believe it's a good thing, the decline of the West, the erasure of the West, because they have been fed so much lies about the crimes of the West and how the world would be a better place if there were, there were no West and there were no white people. It's a crazy narrative that, as far as I can tell, a lot of people are absorbing from a very, very young age. And I think past a certain point, they're just resistant to it.
Well, what would you suggest then? What would you say?
I don't know. I'm a bit black pilled on the outcome. I'm not saying that you shouldn't try, but
okay.
If brainwashing was that easy to reverse, then Mao would never have come into power.
I'm not talking about countering brainwashing. I'm talking about how to speak with power instead of using words that our tormentors, that our victimizers control.
But power doesn't care what we think, right? Power. This is one of the advantages of power. Power does what it wants. Power does not have to listen. What is the point of being an unaccountable elite if you have to listen to the plebs? They have their plan, and
yes, but we aren't writing letters to Keir Starmer. I'm talking about trying to influence people in your local area.
Oh yes,
that's
absolutely.
What I'm talking about. I'm not talking about writing a letter to the White House in America and being like, "You don't like white people." No, of course they don't. Of course they don't. Those words would fall on deaf ears. I'm talking about when people because remember, I always am on the localism perspective of influencing your local townspeople, people at your church, people at your school, people that you work with. That's what I'm talking about. If you have to write a letter, I'm thinking like my sheriff that lives 20 miles from here. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about like don't. I'm not like a Sargon. Write them a letter that just asks them not to come to our country, please. Like, that's not what I'm talking about.
I don't know. It's the White House sounds a bit racist to me.
Oh yes,
to be perfectly honest. I think we should rename it.
Call it the House of Color now.
The House of Color. Exactly. Perhaps the House of Social Justice or something. Oh my God, that's probably going to come true. Oh, I hate it when I say stuff in jest, and then I'm like, actually, that could totally happen.
I mean, you jest, but give it 10 years. If we keep going down this path, who knows?
Yep.
They might even say that using the word white is a sin if it keeps this up. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I think that's enough ad-libbing. Let's get to the stuff that I have prepared, but we'll stay in big and view for now as I start.
Okay.
A quick word about how to label things. Again, you guys know that I like to go free method. I talk about it. I think it's effective. That's why I say I choose the words that I do. And when it comes to these kinds of things, I call it anti-white terror. And the way that the things that are covered up, the things that are downplayed in the methods that Chris outlined, I call hush crimes. The Go Free method calls these hush crimes. These are crimes that are downplayed or silenced or taken away from public view because of the anti-white goal, the anti-white outcome that media and government want. They don't want us to know that there are anti-white terror attacks that happen every day. They don't want us to know. Some are big that they can't hide, so they downplay them. Like, how many times have we read about a stabbing or a grooming gang or someone who ends someone's life who's an immigrant, and they clearly, openly, over religious or racial differences, end someone's life or commit struggle snuggle on someone? And what does the paper say? Man, youth, disturbed individual.
Ah, yes, those damn man.
Yeah, man.
I'm always out at night afraid of man.
Those dang youth. Yeah, it's
always,
like
always looking out for man of no appreciable characteristics whatsoever.
right. So we'll get into some details about that in a minute. But what I wanted to start with is letting you guys know I am going to take a specific instance that you will all remember that happened just a few years ago. Darrell Brooks in Waukesha, the man, the lunatic, the anti-white terrorist piece of crap who drove an SUV through a parade, injured like 60 or 70 people, killed 6 or 7. It was horrible. And the media handled that with kid gloves. Now, they couldn't just make that go away because some lunatic with a history of being openly, aggressively anti-white. He was one of these like really, really off the deep end. Like he believed in all the woo of like the black Hebrew Israelite people. He made rap about Fed posting Whitey, like that kind of stuff. Just real wackadoo. They couldn't really downplay that because of how big it was, and he killed a bunch of people and disrupted a parade and stuff. But they did their best, so that's what we're going to talk about. You guys, I'm sure many of you will remember Darrell Brooks. Even Ron DeSantis, let's issue in some anti-white hate speech laws over my anti-Semitisms. Let's go to Israel and kiss the wall. Ron DeSantis, even he came out and said, and I quote, "To cover this event for what it is, the facts do not support it." That was a quote of his saying that the facts do not support. He was mocking the media. He called it anti-white, the anti-white bias of mass media, and he pointed out that Brooks clearly acted with anti-white animus. Now, I covered this and even made a short video about it on my channel. Happy to hear him correctly label this as anti-white terror, or he didn't say the word terror, but the anti-white animus of the anti-white attack and the anti-white slant in news media. Even Ron DeSantis, I love Israel and the Zionists, Ron DeSantis even said this. Now, let's go ahead and move to the slides, and I'm going to talk about these. Let's go to the first of my slides after we ensmallen, Mr. Chris. There we go. Now, this is the first of 6 slides that we're going to look at. These are just screenshots. I went and looked at the 1 to 2 month period around the Darrell Brooks anti-white terror attack. And I wanted to look at, with the Wayback Machine and other archived articles, I wanted to look at their original headlines the best that I could find. Because you guys know that the media changes headlines after the fact. They have cleaners that go through and scrub and fix things to eliminate gotcha moments. We all know the MSM does this. So I did my best to find the oldest, most original headlines I could for these 6 images. We're going to look at 6 headlines, and I'm going to have a little bit to say about each one of them. They are ranked from most viewed to least viewed, starting with several 100,000 views on a CNN article to only a handful of thousands of views on the last article by like a so-called far-right news source. Man drove SUV into Waukesha Christmas parade, found guilty of intentional homicide. Now, again, I know that many of you listening are old school dissidents from the Gamergate era or even earlier like myself. I know it's a tired boomer talking point to point out hypocrisy of the left. And I know that. but I need to use this to illustrate how blatant the gaslighting is with hush crimes and anti-white terror. So before we get to my next talking point, keep that in mind. This says man who drove SUV. Let's move to the next slide.
There could be man here, he thought.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, actually, don't move just yet. Notice the imagery. I forgot to bring that up. The imagery of man here is repentant. He's sad. This image is a sympathetic image. Visually, this is anti-white and subversive because it shows you a psychotic anti-white piece of crap that purposefully and with spiteful anti-white racially motivated rage and hatred killed innocent white people. And they chose this image to make you sympathetic with this piece of crap, this slime, this vermin. They chose this image to do that, to make you sympathetic to him. Let's move to the next slide now. This is from ABC, old fake news ABC. Darrell Brooks sentenced to life in prison for deadly Christmas parade attack. A little more accurate, a little more closer to the mark, but only barely. And this image, only slightly less on the nose, forcing you to feel sympathy with the criminal. Only slightly. And again, a few 100,000 views for this one. Let's move to the next slide. This is from NPR. This one, I think, only had just under 100,000 views, maybe a little over. I don't remember, but it was it was a lot of views, but not as much as the larger mainstream media. This is from NPR. Quote, gutted and broken as he awaits sentencing. Darrell Brooks Jr. hears from Waukesha Christmas parade tragedy victims. Now, we all know that NPR is full of anti-white fart bags that nobody likes and only dumb cat ladies really enjoy. But NPR still affects a lot of people. A lot of people listen to NPR when they're in the car, when they're driving their work truck, that kind of thing. NPR has just been a staple of American radio listening for a long time. And a lot of people get their news from sources like that. And here we are, gutted and broken as he awaits sentencing.
Just out of curiosity, though, isn't the headline meant to suggest that the victims are gutted and broken, or it's interesting that's left vague?
No, that's my point here. That's my point.
Right.
Is this is a headline. Remember, headlines in the first paragraph are for 95% of all listeners and readers. That is where the big lie really happens in media, is the way it's branded, because that is what lingers in people's minds mimetically. That the vast majority of people only remember a headline and maybe a few words from the first paragraph. That's it. That's why this is where the real magic show, where the illusion happens with hush crime and all the other anti-white twist in the media. Let's move to the next slide. This is where they start to get better for us. This is from Paul Joseph Watson, PJ Media. Waukesha Christmas parade massacre suspect Darrell Brooks terrorizes his victims in the courtroom. That's a pretty sympathetic headline, isn't it? It's pretty close to the truth. And look at this image. This image does not make the viewer sympathetic to Darrell Brooks. This image shows us he is a dangerous muzzled dog being led into the courtroom by armed men because he is a dangerous terrorist lunatic. Let's move to the next slide. Affidavit. Black supremacist Darrell Brooks intentionally rammed parade participants to hit as many white people as possible. Now, disregarding the typo in the headline here, this I think only had like 28,000 views, something like that.
Can I just point out, this is from People's Voice, and People's Voice is absolute trash. I mean, sometimes they're accurate, but sometimes they publish like straight up lies. Just FYI.
Yeah, the point of me sharing these is to show you that you have to get towards the fringe of media before you start finding things that are actually labeling this guy as he should have been labeled. That's the point of this. Like, I'm not telling you that to like any of these news sources or trust any of them. I'm just showing you that the more fringe you get away from mainstream or establishment media, you have to go to the fringe of the fringe to even find people that make headlines that are in line with what the headlines in mainstream media should look like. And of course, they use a picture of his crazy face from his Facebook rapper days. And let's move to the last slide, the most fringe that there is. Information liberation. I've never even heard of them. I don't know who they are. Don't know anything about them. But when I went into looking at the particular slice of time that I was looking at, this is the most accurate headline that I could find from the entire 2-month window that I looked. Anti-white extremist Darrell Brooks found guilty in Waukesha Christmas Parade massacre. That is as close to what it should be across Fox News, MSM, all of MSM, MSNBC. Everything should have called this guy an anti-white terrorist. He committed anti-white terror attack. This was terrorism. This was domestic, racially motivated terrorism. This is how the headline should be read. And this article got like 8,000 views. So the whole point of showing you this, let's go to Embiggen View for now. Oh, wait, no, I forgot about my 7th slide I added at the last minute. Let's go back to small in view. I forgot. Go to my 7th slide that I made today. I forgot about this.
Wait, you added a 7th slide?
Yeah, the 2 different Darrell Brookses in the media. Remember, I made that little comparison slide. I made that today.
Hang on a second. Where is
I sent it to you this morning, Mark, slide 7. It was when we were talking about thumbnail choices.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, hang on a second.
I forgot that I made this until just now, but no, this is what I wanted to talk, what I wanted to bring up while we talked about it. And while we're doing this, I'll go ahead and put up the reminder here. This is a quote from one of his rap lyrics over on the left, or one of his Facebook posts, one of the two. And then I made up the quote over on the right side, the boo-hoo, I'm the victim. This, Darrell Brooks, this duality of creature is what you saw in the headlines. This is what Hush Crime covers up. Hush Crime wants you to be sympathetic with a troubled man who did a crazy, stupid thing. It doesn't want to highlight he was a racially motivated, psychotic, evil, spiteful, anti-white piece of crap that willfully and with long intention wanted to harm and destroy white people. So there we go. Now, that's what I wanted to show you about Darrell Brooks, to illustrate what Chris was talking about earlier, and to speak my piece on anti-white terror attacks and hush crime. So now, thank you, Chris, we can go to Embiggen View. All right. Moving on with my presentation now. I would like the viewer to now remember something that happened a little earlier. I want you to remember Kyle Rittenhouse. Boy, that sounds like a long time ago, doesn't it? The young man who defended himself against anti-white Antifa thugs, how he was called all kinds of things by media pundits, by news, far-right, Nazi, white nationalist, even a terrorist by some major news networks, and even the simplest of investigations into Kyle Rittenhouse that any one of us could have done with Google and Facebook showed us that Kyle Rittenhouse was a liberal. He wasn't really a conservative. He didn't hold any beliefs that any reasonable person would consider far-right at all. In fact, he could have been considered left-wing in a lot of ways. He supported the BLM movement. He rejected the concept of white identity. That's what I could easily find out about Kyle Rittenhouse when he became known. I could easily find that out with like 10 or 20 minutes of just poking around online. And yet, media pundits, people all across the news sphere, they lapped it up. They're like, oh, this is some gun nut. This is some far-right gun nut militia. What was the word they were using back then? Boogaloo boy, right? Like, you remember what all the crap they said about that back then?
He crossed state lines, bro. He
crossed state lines, bro, even though he lived in a city that was on a state line.
Right. 3 innocent black men who were just there to attend a totally peaceful...
3 completely innocent Jewish Marxist pedophiles.
No, they were just, mostly peaceful BLM protests. Yeah. I still hear people saying this now, like that.
I know. Like I've heard it too.
He just shot a bunch of like innocent black people. It's so crazy.
Yep. All right. So, anyway, somebody else brought up state lines in the chat too. I see that there. But anyway, I wanted to bring up Kyle Rittenhouse because despite his adolescent beliefs, one way or the other, he displayed through his own heroic actions the spirit of the founding fathers. Embodiment of the Second Amendment. If the American regime and the news media were not objectively anti-white, anti-male, and anti-American, Kyle Rittenhouse would have probably been celebrated as an American hero. If things were just and the ruling morality was not anti-white, then he probably would have been some kind of hero, or at least would have been talked about neutral to positively in the media. But he wasn't, was he? They could have said, a young man who just wanted to help protect private property, a young man who exercised his Second Amendment right as the founding fathers wanted, was put in an unfortunate situation where he had to end people's lives. They could have talked about it like that, but they didn't. This is absolutely not how the MSM or the government responded to Kyle, and it's not how they respond to anything that involves our victimization. At the time of the incident, headlines and pundits at MSM used buzzwords like we covered earlier, just like with Darrell Brooks, just like they do with the hundreds of other anti-white terror attacks that happen all the time. How much do you guys remember about Trump's America during the first Trump administration and even leading up to it? How they said, oh, in Trump's America, you're going to have to, if you're a homosexual or if you're a non-white, you're going to have to live in fear. You guys remember that? I remember that. Dozens of other polarized terms have been ramped up in our media since around 2010 or 2011. Words like racist and far right and Nazi and all these other anti-white slurs. This is the anti-white narrative that I talk about. This narrative lives in us. When you absorb this every day, especially if you're a young person that grew up with all of this, those mean pathogens live in you, and the news media activates them in you to make you feel ashamed or powerless or impotently angry. They do this to you, to us, on purpose. They want you, regular working class person, you white American or white British, you any white person with heritage where you live, they want you to be ashamed, scared, and powerless to defend yourself against the purposeful ethnic, racial, cultural erasure being perpetrated on you in your own homeland. They want you to sit idly by or even celebrate as your children are rendered sterile, abused, forced into ugly situations that I don't even want to say in words. They want this, and they're doing it on purpose. I bring up this duality, this hypocrisy, because it is imperative you understand the why behind it that Chris outlined earlier. Regardless of the motivation of any individual politician, media pundit, or public mouthpiece, in action, they are all gaslighting you, manipulating you, intimidating you, because they want the proper inheritors of America or the white country you live in to be powerless and think that the future of your own country is not for you or your children. They want you to be powerless to do anything about the theft of your heritage and the eradication of your progeny. Now, something else I want to talk about is the Twitter files that came up earlier. Intelligence and security operatives that work for the government directly influence our news media and social media. We know this. Time Magazine's infamous or famous, depending on your take, article about fortification of the 2020 election, right? It's out in the open. They openly brag about controlling and shaping the narrative to get the result they want with subversion, with misdirection, with propping up some terms, burying other terms. They bragged about this openly. Time Magazine article. Go look it up. As mentioned by myself and Don the Pleb many years ago, the U.S. Counterinsurgency Doctrine, or Cohen Manual for short, and that's C-O-I-N, not Cohen, as well as many other U.S. intelligence reports. Those reports and military intelligence in America specifically names white Americans, heritage Americans, especially Christians, as dangerous, far-right, white nationalist extremists. They name us specifically as the #1 threat to the American regime. Just like Chris talked about earlier. All the stuff he outlined, all the things about Britain, all of the corruption, how they have completely changed tack to target us. We just don't, we want to exist. We want our children to not be mind warred, eradicated, or struggle snuggled out of existence. We want streets that look like our people, that are filled with people that look like us, I mean. We want to live in a community by our people, for our people. That is a normal thing to want, an entirely normal, natural human thing to want. And if you're white and want that, you are a far-right Nazi mega terrorist. You are the super Hitler, if you want that, according to both the American and the British government. That should tell you something. Now, in closing, to drive home Chris's point about there being nowhere left for the regime to go, you guys know that I like to end on a positive note if I can. The use of anti-white slurs like racist, bigot, Karen, far-right, Nazi, fascist, conspiracy theorist, and all these other anti-white slurs that we hear all the time in news media and out of the mouths of politicians, they're already landing on deaf ears to a large percentage of the populace. People are taking notice now of the blatant exclusion, derision, and outright violence against white people that goes unsatisfied to us by the government and by law enforcement. There will be more Darrell Brooks attacks. There will be more attacks like in Southport. They will keep happening. There will be more white erasure by the rotten, evil governments and corporations who rule us. But how long can their gaslighting continue? Their main model of control has been guilting us, white guilting us, into not believing our lying eyes, into pressuring us to deny our natural God-given instincts of survival, and to distract ourselves with dopamine from social media and video games. They enforce us to lose ourselves to mindless, selfish hedonism of drugs and fast food and pornography and all this mess. But that illusion is fading. Their spell will soon be broken one way or another, whether it's through competency crisis, the collapse of the petrodollar, or something even more dire than that. This is all going to end. I want every single one of you listening to this right now to think about when that day comes, because that day is coming. And the more of us with our heads in the game, the more of us who have intelligently built community, friendships, and fortified our minds, the better chance that not only our families, but our people have at a future worth sharing together. And that's where I'm going to leave it off tonight.
Nice.
So that was my possible white pill, hopefully. And that's one of the main reasons that I wanted to do this stream series with Chris, is I want you guys to equip yourselves with the terminology, the ideas, thoughts, and behaviors that can lead you to choosing the right people to associate with. Not groypers, not these neo-Nazi idiots, not these neo-fascist or neo-Confederate militia retards that want to just say, oh, we're going to keep our powder dry and water that tree of liberty with the blood of tyrants. Woo! Like, those people, maybe some of them are okay, but most of them I've met are just fools. They're just angry fools with no real plan and nothing but wanting to wait in their mountain holler or their bunker to die. They're not actually organizing or doing anything. The Old Glory Club does stuff. The White Wellbeing Group does stuff. People that I know that are networking all throughout Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, they're making communities, just like the people of Orania, the people down in South Africa that have made Afroforum. That's why I big up Conscious Caracal and talk about Afroforum a lot. Those people have community watches. They have interconnected community groups that share resources, ideas, family traditions. They keep what's important to their people alive, and they protect it legally, financially, and through logistics and resources. We are going to have to be like them if we are going to survive and have a future. Learn from people who are already connected, building, and doing. Follow the Old Glory Club. Go check out what the White Wellbeing community is up to. Learn from Afroforum in South Africa. There are people out there that are setting good examples of what to do. You can learn from them. So that's I know I spoke a little more than I meant to tonight, but I had a lot to say on this, and this Southport shit, man, it's just, it cranks me up a lot, and I don't even live in Britain, but man.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's brutal. Yeah.
So again, it's difficult to be white pilled these days. There's a lot to be black pilled about, but just remember, our people are not stupid. We see what's happening. It's just most of us are too crippled with guilt and shame and impotent rage to do much about it. So network with who you can and all that, and hope for the best. And that's the best white pill I got in all this, guys, is their lies can't last forever, and they're not making children, but we are. And if you raise those kids with the right values and the right mindset, then that's the best we can do.
Well, could I also point out that, like I was saying, the narrative is almost completely run out of runway at this point. There's going to be no choice but to, shift to sort of the widespread use of force. And, as bad as that may be, at least people will stop believing that there is, some sort of huggy utopia at the end of the road, that the government is just, trying to make a society where everyone can exist equally. I know it's a slightly accelerationist argument, but it is what it is. I'm pretty sure what is coming up is going to be terrible for civil liberties in the UK, racially based. Obviously, not all groups will be equally affected, and that's going to be an interesting shift. I mean, I would predict sort of rising levels of mental illness in those who are sort of continuing to cleave to the narrative. I would expect a massive ramping up of stuff about climate change to give people something else to distract them as things deteriorate. It's going to be interesting.
It is. But again, guys, you just got to keep heart and you got to do the best that you can, because again, their lies in this gaslighting and this narrative, it can't last forever. We're either going to go extinct or they're going to lose, and they're probably going to lose before they can make all of us gone. So just keep heart and do the best you can and do the smartest thing that you can, which is, like we talk about all the time, being concerned and invested with people around you. And if there isn't, move to where there are. So we have some paid chats to get to, so we're going to get to them right now before we head out, because we are at the hour mark since I blabbermouthed a lot. First up, we're going to do them in order. We're starting with Arakeen Green Moon over on Entropy for $5 US. Thank you so much, Arakeen. Arakeen says, I just finished listening to the AA video that you recommended earlier. Oh, well, good. And given your topic looks to be similar, and yes, it is. Arakeen says, I had a thought. You may not control the direction at times, but you can control the amount of force or speed you take in that direction. Too much speed or force can lead to derailing. Yes, I think I know what you're saying.
No, I know what she's saying. I think.
Is it a she? I'm sorry, I thought it was a he.
I believe she's talking about the the regime and the force that they're using. And look, I agree with that. We have become so used to the sort of skills of narrative shaping. And I would say that the government has, in fact, become so enamored with them, a bit like the One Ring, like someone who just wakes up one day and discovers, hey, I could just lie. I could just lie about everything. And for a while, it seems to work, right? They just lie.
Sort of like a Ponzi scheme. It works until it doesn't.
What they don't realize is that they're burning through all of their trust and capital, and that at a certain point, everyone will stop listening to them, at which they'll be faced by other options. If they can manage this transition to hard managerialism, it's going to be very, very interesting to see. I'm not sure that they have the skills to do this, but you never know.
Next up, we have from Jason Kuna over on Cash App for $6. Thank you, brother. Glad to see you here tonight. He says, enjoying the show, Folk Tithe and Kip. Well, thank you, brother. Big appreciation. And last but not least, over on Entropy again, we have Simon JJ, longtime friend of the channel and financial supporter, for $15. Thank you so much. He says, superb topic, chaps. Brilliant presentation from both of us. Well,
thank you so much, mate. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. I do appreciate it. I'm going to refresh everything one more time just to make sure that we're not missing anybody. But I think that is all the paid chats, and we can get out of here. All right. Yep, that is everything. So I hope that you guys all have a wonderful weekend. Chris and I will be back Monday, Habiting TV at 3 p.m. London time. I'm sorry, 8 p.m. London time, 3 p.m. New York. And, of course, 6 p.m. Tennessee time and 11 p.m. London time. Will be Discordant Dragons this coming Monday. Unfortunately, Hayes Reviews had to drop out, so I'll have to find a replacement. But he said he might be back one day. We wish him the best. He has a great channel. We'll be back Monday.
Big ups, Nick, if you're watching, mate.
Yeah, I hope you're watching, Nick. Me and Chris are both big fans of yours. We like your work, and we think you're an all-around good chap. So, again, keep heart, everybody. Speak the truth, and just do the best you can, and never give up, because giving up is what they want. So you can't give them that. All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. God bless.
Good night, everyone.